my daughter's wedding invitation arrived with my name crossed out in black ink. For words scrawled beneath in her fiancé's handwriting, "You'll ruin everything. Stay away." I stood in my pottery studio, clay still wet on my hands, that envelope trembling between my fingers. I didn't call. I didn't plead. But what unfolded on her perfect day would reveal a truth neither she nor her fiancé ever saw coming, one that would turn their carefully constructed world to dust. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The envelope had arrived on a Thursday afternoon in early October, delivered not by the regular postal carrier but by a private courier service. I was in my studio, my hands deep in terracotta clay, shaping what would become a series of planters for the community garden downtown. At 70 years old, my fingers still remember the language of earth and water, the patient conversation between pressure and form. The courier, a young woman with a clipboard, seemed uncomfortable as she handed me the cream-colored envelope with gold leaf edging. "Signature required, ma'am," she said, avoiding my eyes. I wiped my hands on my apron, the blue one with paint stains from 15 years of use, and signed. The envelope felt heavy, expensive, the kind of paper that announced itself before you even opened it. The return address was embossed in flowing calligraphy: "Miss Charlotte Hayes and Mr. Dominic Castellano cordially invite you to celebrate their union. My daughter. Getting married." I carried it to my workbench, the one position near the window where afternoon light pooled like honey. My reading glasses hung on a chain around my neck. I pulled them on and opened the envelope with careful hands, respectful of the craftsmanship even before I knew what message it carried. The invitation was exquisite. Thick cardstock with deckled edges, letterpress printing that left subtle impressions in the paper, a silk ribbon threaded through a hand-punched hole. Someone had spent considerable money on these. But as I unfolded the inner card, my breath stopped. A thick black line had been drawn through Ms. Margot Hayes. Beside it, in tight, aggressive script I recognized as Dominic's, "You'll ruin everything. Stay away." No explanation. No apology. Just those 5 words that landed like a fist to the sternum. I set the invitation down carefully, as if sudden movement might make it more real. Around me, my studio continued its quiet existence, the potter's wheel in the corner, shelves lined with glazed bowls and mugs waiting for the next firing, the smell of wet clay and wood smoke from the kiln. This space had been my sanctuary for 30 years, the place where grief became art, where loneliness became creation. Now it felt like a room where bad news echoed. The wedding was set for December 12, 8 weeks away. At the Belvedere Manor, an estate in the Sonoma Valley known for hosting celebrity weddings and charity galas. The kind of place that required a month's notice and a guest list vetted by event coordinators. I picked up the invitation again, studying my daughter's name printed in elegant script. Charlotte. My Charlie. The girl who used to sit on this very bench, her small hands covered in clay, laughing as we built lopsided pinch pots together. When had I lost her? The memories came like a flood, uninvited but impossible to resist. Charlotte was 9 when her father left. Daniel had been a charming man, a stockbroker with expensive tastes and a wandering eye. He'd swept me off my feet when I was 28, I was working as a gallery assistant, he was buying art for his penthouse. We married quickly, had Charlotte within a year, and for a while, I believed we were building something real. But Daniel's world was built on appearances, not foundations. When the market crashed in 2008 and he lost his job, he didn't rebuild. He ran. Left me with a 9-year-old daughter, a mortgage I couldn't afford, and divorce papers served by a lawyer whose hourly rate exceeded my monthly salary. I sold the house, moved us to a modest apartment in Oakland, and went back to the one thing I knew would never betray me: clay. I'd studied ceramics in college before dropping out to marry Daniel. Now, at 37, I picked up where I'd left off. I apprenticed with a master potter, worked farmers markets on weekends, taught classes at the community center. The money was tight, laughably tight those first years, but my hands were busy, and Charlotte never went hungry. I taught her to throw pots when she was 10. She had natural talent, an intuitive understanding of how clay wanted to move. We'd spend Saturday mornings in the studio I rented in a converted warehouse, our hands mirroring each other's movements, speaking in the wordless language of makers. "Mom, why did Dad leave?" she asked me once, her voice small, her hands still shaping a bowl on the wheel. "Because he didn't know how to stay," I told her. "Some people run when things get hard. But we're not runners, Charlie. We're builders." She'd nodded, returning her focus to the clay. For years, that was enough. We were a team. Mother and daughter against the world, building a life from mud and fire and stubborn persistence. But then high school came, and with it, the slow erosion of our partnership. Charlotte was brilliant. She earned a full scholarship to UC Berkeley, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in economics, then went straight to Harvard Business School. By 25, she was working for a consulting firm in San Francisco, pulling down a six-figure salary and wearing suits that cost more than I made in a month. She stopped visiting the studio. Stopped calling except on holidays. When she did call, the conversations were brief, professional, as if I were a client she needed to update rather than the woman who'd raised her. "I'm busy, Mom," she'd say when I suggested dinner. "These projects are demanding." You understand. I did understand. I understood that my daughter was building the kind of life her father had wanted, polished, prestigious, powerful. And that in that life, there wasn't much room for a mother who still had clay under her fingernails. Then, 2 years ago, she called with news. "Mom, I met someone. His name is Dominic Castellano. He's amazing." I'd heard the breathless quality in her voice, the kind of infatuation that makes young women blind. "Tell me about him," I said, genuinely curious. "He's a senior partner at a private equity firm. Harvard MBA, like me. His family is, well, they're very successful. His father owns commercial real estate across the West Coast. His mother is on the board of the San Francisco Opera. And what's he like? As a person?" A pause. "He's ambitious. Driven. He sees the world the way I do, as a place full of opportunities if you're willing to work for them." "Does he make you happy?" "Mom, he makes me feel like I'm finally where I belong." The words had stung more than I cared to admit. The first time I met Dominic was at a restaurant he chose. Mercer and Vine, a Michelin-starred establishment in San Francisco's financial district where reservations required a 2-month wait and entrees started at $60. Charlotte had insisted on treating, though I knew it was really Dominic's money paying the bill. I dressed carefully, my best slacks, a silk blouse I'd bought secondhand, a necklace I'd made from fired porcelain beads. In the mirror before I left, I'd looked like exactly what I was. A 70-year-old ceramic artist trying to fit into a world that valued polish over authenticity. Dominic was waiting at the table when I arrived, standing to greet me with a handshake that was firm but somehow dismissive, as if he were checking a box on a list of obligations. "Ms. Hayes. Charlotte's told me so much about you." He was handsome in that carefully constructed way, sharp suit, perfect hair, watch that probably cost more than my car. His smile never reached his eyes. "Please, call me Margot," I said, settling into the chair he pulled out with exaggerated courtesy. Charlotte arrived moments later, breathless and beautiful in a designer dress. She kissed Dominic first, then me, and the order of that didn't escape my notice. Dinner was excruciating. The portions were absurdly small, decorative arrangements of foam and micrograins that disappeared in 2 bites. The wine list was longer than most novels. And Dominic dominated every conversation with the confidence of a man who'd never been told he might be wrong. "Charlotte mentioned you're an artist," he said, the word artist carrying just enough condescension to sting. "I'm a ceramicist. I make functional pottery." "How rustic." He swirled his wine. "I've always admired people who can make a living from hobbies. It must be very fulfilling." "It's not a hobby. It's my profession." Charlotte jumped in quickly. "Mom's work is beautiful. She has pieces in galleries all over the Bay Area." "Galleries," Dominic repeated, as if the word amused him. I imagine that's quite different from what Charlotte and I do. Real business, I mean. Markets, investments, tangible value creation. I set down my fork carefully. Making things people use every day seems fairly tangible to me. His smile sharpened. Of course. I didn't mean to diminish your craft. It's just a different world from ours. Ours. As if he and Charlotte were already a unit, and I was the outsider. The meal continued in that vein, Dominic steering every topic toward his accomplishments, his firm's recent acquisitions, his family's connections. Charlotte listened with rapt attention, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm with a familiarity that made my heart ache. When the check came, Dominic made a show of pulling out a black credit card. My treat, he announced. Can't have Charlotte's mother paying. That would be gauche. The way he said Charlotte's mother, not Margot, not even Miss Hayes, made it clear I was a category, not a person. Driving home that night in my old Honda, I gripped the steering wheel and tried to silence the alarm bells ringing in my head. Charlotte was happy. Wasn't that what mattered? So what if Dominic was arrogant? Lots of successful men were arrogant. She could handle him. But deep down, I knew. I knew the way mothers know, with an instinct that defies logic. This man didn't love my daughter. He loved what she represented, the prestigious degree, the successful career, the ability to fit seamlessly into his world of power and appearances. And Charlotte, my brilliant, driven Charlotte, was so hungry for the approval her father had denied her that she couldn't see it. The months that followed confirmed my fears. Charlotte called less and less. When she did, it was always brief, always with Dominic in the background. Can't talk long, Mom. Dominic and I have a dinner with some clients. Sorry to cut this short, we're flying to Aspen for the weekend. Maybe next month we can visit. Dominic's schedule is just insane right now. I tried to be understanding. Tried to tell myself that young couples needed space to build their relationship. But the distance wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual even. My daughter was disappearing into someone else's life, and I was losing her inch by inch. Then came the engagement announcement. Charlotte called on a Tuesday evening, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm. Mom, Dominic proposed. We're getting married in December. December? That's only 6 months away. I know, it's fast, but his mother found the perfect venue, and we couldn't pass it up. The Belvedere Manor, have you heard of it? No. It's stunning. Very exclusive. Only the best families use it. The phrase best families landed like a slap. Charlie, are you sure about this? You've only known him a year. Mom. Her voice cooled instantly. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you we're getting married. I hoped you'd be happy for me. I am happy if you're happy. I just want to make sure you're not rushing. I have to go. Dominic's calling. We'll talk soon. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my studio that evening, staring at a bowl I'd been glazing. The surface was cracked, I'd applied too much pressure, forced the process instead of letting it unfold naturally. I threw it in the discard bin and started over. Some things can't be rushed. Some things need time to reveal their true shape. The whispers started reaching me through unexpected channels. My friend Beatrice, who volunteered at the art museum, mentioned seeing Charlotte at a fundraising gala. She looked stunning, Margot. But I don't know. She seemed different. Colder, maybe? She barely acknowledged people she used to know. Spent the whole night on that fiancé's arm, laughing at things that weren't funny. A week later, my former student Devin, now a successful graphic designer, stopped by the studio. Miss Hayes, I saw Charlotte last month at a networking event. I tried to say hello, but she kind of looked through me. Like she didn't want to acknowledge she knew someone from community college ceramics class. Each story was a small cut, but together they formed a picture I didn't want to see. My daughter was ashamed. Not of anything she'd done, but of where she'd come from. Of me. The invitation with its cruel message merely confirmed what I'd been trying to deny. I didn't call Charlotte immediately. Instead, I did what I always did when the world felt overwhelming. I made something. I pulled out a block of porcelain, the finest clay I owned, and began to throw a vase. Tall, elegant, with walls so thin they'd be nearly translucent when fired. It would take days to complete, requiring patience and precision and the kind of attention that couldn't be rushed. As my hands shaped the clay, I thought about Charlotte. About the little girl who used to narrate stories while we worked side by side. About the teenager who'd sat at this wheel, tears streaming down her face after her first heartbreak, finding solace in the mindless rhythm of creation. Where was that girl now? On the third day of working on the vase, my phone rang. Charlotte. Mom. Her voice was tight, defensive. Did you get the invitation? I did. Silence. I suppose you have questions. Just one. Did you know what he wrote? A longer silence. Dominic thought it was best. The wedding it's complicated, Mom. His family has certain expectations. Expectations that don't include me. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Charlotte? Explain to me how your mother gets uninvited from your wedding. Her voice hardened. You wouldn't fit in, Mom. Dominic's family, the guests, they're from a different world. Everyone will be dressed in designer clothes, talking about investments in real estate and things you don't understand. His mother is already stressed about the seating arrangements and the press coverage. Press coverage? The society pages are covering it. Dominic's family is prominent. This isn't just a wedding, it's an event. And I need everything to be perfect. And I'd ruin perfect. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Your fiancé said it for you. She exhaled sharply. Mom, why do you always have to make everything so difficult? Can't you just understand that I'm trying to build a life here? A real life, not scraping by selling bowls at farmers' markets. The words hit like a physical blow. Is that what you think I did? Scraped by? I didn't mean. Yes, you did. You meant exactly that. You're embarrassed by me, Charlotte. By my work, my life, the fact that I didn't marry rich or climb some corporate ladder. You're embarrassed that your mother makes things with her hands instead of moving money around on spreadsheets. That's not fair. Neither is this. My voice broke despite my efforts to keep it steady. I raised you alone. When your father left, I didn't fall apart. I didn't give up. I worked every day to give you a good life, to show you that worth isn't measured in dollars but in what you create, what you contribute, how you treat people. And look where that got you, she interrupted coldly. Still in that same studio, still selling mugs for $20, still living in a one-bedroom apartment at 70 years old. I'm sorry, Mom, but I want more than that. I want security. I want respect. I want to be someone. You already are someone. You're my daughter. I have to go. Dominic's waiting. She hung up. I set the phone down carefully, my hands shaking. Around me, the studio, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like evidence of failure. The shelves of pottery, the kiln, the wheel worn smooth from decades of use. Was this all I'd achieved? Was Charlotte right? No. I pushed the thought away. Worth isn't measured by wealth. I'd built a life of meaning, of beauty, of honest work. I'd raised a daughter I thought understood that. But maybe I'd been wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small bedroom, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, the couple arguing next door, the dogs barking, the distant rush of traffic on the freeway. This apartment had been home for 30 years. I knew every crack in the ceiling, every creak in the floorboards. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't Belvedere Manor. But it was mine. I got up and made tea, then sat at my kitchen table with a box I kept on the top shelf of my closet. Inside were photographs, letters, memories I'd preserved like pressed flowers. There was Charlotte at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up her first successful pinch pot. Charlotte at 12, covered in glaze, laughing at something I'd said. Charlotte at 18, graduation day, her arms around me, whispering I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. I touched that photograph, tracing the outline of her face. When had things changed? When had pride become shame? When had love become resentment? At the bottom of the box was a letter Charlotte had written me when she was 16. I unfolded it carefully, the paper soft with age. Dear Mom. I know I don't say this enough, but thank you. Thank you for showing me that you don't need a man to be strong. Thank you for teaching me that creating something beautiful matters more than buying something expensive. Thank you for being exactly who you are, even when the world tells you to be someone else. I'm proud to be your daughter. Love always, Charlie. I folded the letter and put it back in the box, my throat tight with unshed tears. That girl still existed somewhere, buried under designer clothes and corporate ambitions. I had to believe that. The question was, could I reach her before she disappeared completely? The next morning, I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Hayes? This is Victoria Castellano. Dominic's mother. I straightened in my chair, surprised. Mrs. Castellano. I wanted to reach out personally regarding the wedding arrangements. Her voice was smooth, cultured, every syllable precisely placed. I understand there was some confusion about the guest list. Your son uninvited me. That's not confusion. A delicate pause. Yes, well. Dominic can be protective of the family's image. I'm sure you understand that a wedding of this caliber requires careful curation of the guest list. Careful curation. That's an interesting way to describe excluding the bride's mother. Ms. Hayes, let me be frank. Her voice cooled several degrees. My son is marrying into a very specific social circle. Charlotte has worked hard to establish herself in that circle. Your presence at the wedding would raise questions. Questions about what? About Charlotte's background. Her upbringing. The fact that her mother is a craftswoman. The word dripped with disdain. I see. And you're worried I'll show up in overalls with clay under my fingernails? I'm worried you'll remind people that Charlotte comes from humble circumstances. That could affect her social standing, which in turn could affect Dominic's business relationships. Surely you can understand the delicacy of the situation. What I understand is that you and your son are bullies. And my daughter has learned to be ashamed of love because you've taught her to worship money. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Money isn't something to worship, Ms. Hayes. It's simply the language of success. Something you clearly never learned to speak. I speak fluent love. Fluent sacrifice. Fluent perseverance. Those are languages your money can't buy. How quaint. Unfortunately, quaint doesn't pay for estates in Sonoma or secure business deals or open doors in society. Charlotte understands that now. She's evolved beyond her origins. It's time you accepted that. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, rage and grief warring in my chest. This was what Charlotte had chosen. Not just a man, but a family. A value system. A world that measured worth in bank accounts and social connections rather than character and compassion. And she decided I had no place in it. Words spread through my community like ripples in water. My friend Teresa, who owned the coffee shop down the street, brought me a latte in sympathy. I heard what happened, Margot. I'm so sorry. I shook my head. News travels fast. Small community. People talk. She squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, Charlotte's making a mistake. Anyone who's ashamed of you is a fool. My student Devin stopped by the studio with flowers. Ms. Hayes, I just wanted you to know everything you taught me about finding value in the process, not just the product. That changed my life. Charlotte might not see what she has in you, but the rest of us do. Even strangers weighed in. A woman at the farmer's market recognized me from a local newspaper article about artisan potters. You're Charlotte Hayes' mother, aren't you? I saw her engagement announcement in the society pages. Her expression turned sympathetic. I heard she's marrying into the Castellano family. Those people are, well, they're not known for warmth. Each comment, each expression of sympathy, each acknowledgement of the injustice reinforced what I already knew: my daughter had lost her way. But knowing didn't make it easier. Knowing didn't stop the ache that settled in my chest like a physical weight. One evening, I was closing up the studio when Raymond Chen appeared at my door. Raymond and I had served together in Vietnam, different units, but we'd reconnected at a veterans group 20 years ago. He'd become a successful immigration attorney, but he'd never forgotten where he came from or who'd helped him along the way. Margot. He stepped inside, his expression serious. We need to talk. About what? About Charlotte. About Dominic Castellano. I gestured to the chairs near my workbench. Sit. Tell me. Raymond pulled out a folder. I did some digging. Called in a few favors from colleagues who work in corporate law. Why? Because something about this whole situation didn't sit right. A man who bans his future mother-in-law from a wedding. That's not just snobbery. That's cruelty. And cruelty usually has a reason. He opened the folder, spreading documents across my workbench. Dominic Castellano has a pattern. This is his third engagement. I blinked. Third? The first ended when his fiancée discovered he'd been embezzling from his own firm to maintain his lifestyle. The charges were dropped because his family paid restitution, but the woman left him. The second engagement fell apart when she found out he'd lied about his role in a business deal, claimed credit for a success his partner actually achieved. Are you seeing a pattern? He's a liar. He's more than that. He's a fabricator. Someone who builds his entire identity on appearances and achievements that aren't his. And Charlotte, brilliant as she is, fits perfectly into that narrative. Harvard MBA, successful career, beautiful, she makes him look legitimate. And I threaten that. Raymond nodded. You're proof that Charlotte came from humble circumstances. That she's self-made, not born into privilege. For Dominic, that's a liability. He needs everyone to believe he's marrying an equal, someone from his world. Your presence destroys that illusion. I stared at the documents, my hands trembling slightly. Does Charlotte know any of this? I doubt it. Men like Dominic are skilled at controlling narratives. And your daughter, as much as I respect her intelligence, is vulnerable right now. She's spent her whole life trying to escape the shadow of her father's abandonment. Dominic represents everything Daniel wasn't: stable, successful, committed. She's not seeing clearly. What do I do with this information? Raymond closed the folder. That's up to you. But I thought you should know the truth about who your daughter is marrying. After he left, I sat alone in the studio, the folder on my lap, the weight of knowledge heavy in my hands. I could tell Charlotte. Show her the evidence. Force her to see what Dominic really was. But would she believe me? Or would she see it as a desperate attempt to sabotage her happiness? I thought of my daughter's voice on the phone. You're embarrassed by me, Mom. No. I couldn't be the one to expose Dominic. Not yet. If I did, she'd never forgive me. But I could be ready. I could wait for the moment when the truth revealed itself, as truth always does. And when that moment came, I would be there, whether Charlotte wanted me or not. The vase I'd been working on was finally ready for its first firing. I placed it carefully in the kiln, setting the temperature for a slow bisque fire. Porcelain is unforgiving, too fast, and it shatters. Too slow, and it never reaches its full strength. Like relationships. Like love. Like the truth. As the kiln heated, I sat in my studio and watched the temperature gauge climb. Outside, the October light faded to November gray. The wedding was 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to decide how to fight for my daughter without losing her forever. I touched the small pendant around my neck, a fired clay disc I'd made decades ago, stamped with Charlotte's baby handprint. I'd worn it every day since she was born. "I'm not giving up on you, Charlie," I whispered. "Even if you've given up on me." The kiln hummed its ancient song, transforming fragile clay into something that could withstand time and pressure and heat. I could only hope that when the fire came, and it would come, Charlotte would emerge stronger, not shattered. The weeks between November and December felt like watching a slow-motion avalanche. I knew destruction was coming, could see it building with terrible clarity, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. My daughter was hurtling toward a cliff, and all I could do was wait at the bottom with open arms. I didn't contact Charlotte after our phone call. What would be the point? She'd made her position clear, and pushing would only drive her further into Dominic's carefully constructed world. Instead, I did what I'd always done when life became overwhelming. I worked. The vase I'd been throwing emerged from the bisque firing intact, its walls translucent and strong. I spent days mixing the perfect glaze, a celadon green that would crackle slightly as it cooled, creating patterns like ice on a winter window. Each brushstroke required precision and patience. Rush the process, and the glaze would run. Apply too little, and the color wouldn't develop properly. Some things can't be forced. Some things need time to reveal their true nature. Raymond stopped by the studio 3 days after our initial conversation, another folder under his arm. "I found more," he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from my workbench. I set down my brush carefully. "More what?" "More evidence that Dominic Castellano is not who he claims to be." He opened the folder, spreading photographs and documents across the scarred wooden surface. "This is from his college years at Harvard." The photos showed a younger Dominic, his hair longer, his expression less polished. In several images, he stood beside a tall blonde woman with her arm around his waist. "Madison Whitmore," Raymond said, tapping one photo. They dated for 3 years. Got engaged their final semester. The wedding was supposed to be at her family's estate in Connecticut, their old money, shipping fortune going back 5 generations. What happened? Madison's father is a careful man. Before the wedding, he had Dominic investigated. Discovered that most of Dominic's achievements at Harvard were exaggerated or fabricated. The prestigious internship he claimed? He was actually a junior assistant who filed paperwork. The investment club he supposedly founded? Someone else started it, he just took credit after they graduated. Even his academic record was inflated, he'd been claiming honors he never received. I studied the photographs, seeing something in young Dominic's eyes I recognized now in the man my daughter planned to marry, a desperate hunger to be seen as more than he was. Madison's father gave him a choice, Raymond continued. Come clean to Madison and face the consequences, or walk away quietly. Dominic chose the latter. Left Madison a note saying he couldn't be tied down, breaking her heart to save his reputation. In the second engagement? Raymond pulled out another set of documents. Elena Rodriguez. They met at his consulting firm. She was a rising star, brilliant analyst, daughter of immigrants who'd built a successful construction business. Sound familiar? The parallel to Charlotte was unmistakable. Dominic pursued her aggressively. Swept her off her feet with expensive dates, constant attention, promises of a future together. They got engaged after 8 months. But Elena started noticing inconsistencies. He'd claim credit for projects she knew he hadn't worked on. He'd exaggerate his role in company successes. When she confronted him, he became defensive, then manipulative, told her she was being paranoid, that she should trust him, that her working-class background made her insecure. My hands clenched involuntarily. What happened? Elena's brother is a forensic accountant. He dug into Dominic's finances and found something interesting. Dominic was living well beyond his means. Taking on debt to maintain the appearance of wealth, using credit to fund the lifestyle he claimed was supported by his salary and family money. When Elena discovered this, she broke off the engagement. Dominic tried to sue her for the ring, but eventually dropped it when her brother threatened to make the financial records public. Raymond leaned back, his expression grim. Now we have Charlotte. Another brilliant woman from humble origins, another whirlwind romance, another expensive wedding. Except this time, Dominic's learned from his mistakes. This time, he's isolating her from anyone who might see through him, starting with you. I stared at the documents, my mind racing. Why is he doing this? What does he get from marrying Charlotte if he's just going to repeat the same pattern? Legitimacy. Charlotte's success is real. Her Harvard MBA, her consulting career, her reputation, it's all earned. Marrying her gives him credibility. And if he can convince her to distance herself from her background, from you, then there's no one left who knows he's built on lies. Except you. Raymond smiled grimly. Except me. And I'm not invited to the wedding either. I gathered the documents carefully, sliding them back into the folder. I can't show her these. She'll think I'm trying to sabotage her happiness. Then what will you do? I thought of the vase in the kiln, waiting for its final firing. Thought of how heat and pressure either strengthen or shatter, depending on what's underneath the glaze. I'll wait, I said quietly. And I'll be ready when the truth reveals itself. Because it will, Raymond. Men like Dominic always crack under pressure. And if Charlotte gets hurt in the process? Then I'll be there to help her heal. That's what mothers do. The whispers about the wedding had transformed into a steady drumbeat of gossip throughout the Bay Area arts community. My friend Beatrice called one evening, her voice tight with anger. Margot, I just got back from a fundraising dinner at the Getty Museum. Guess who was there? Charlotte. And Dominic. They were holding court with some of San Francisco's wealthiest donors, and I overheard part of their conversation. Someone asked Charlotte about her family, and Dominic jumped in before she could answer. Said, and I quote, Charlotte's mother passed away when she was young. She essentially raised herself. The words hit like a physical blow. He told people I'm dead? Charlotte didn't correct him. She just stood there, nodding, letting him erase you from her history. After Beatrice hung up, I sat in the darkness of my studio, surrounded by decades of work, shelves of bowls and mugs, platters and vases, each piece a testament to my existence, my craft, my stubborn refusal to disappear. But to my daughter, I was already gone. The realization settled over me like frost, cold and crystallizing. Charlotte wasn't just embarrassed by me. She'd allowed Dominic to kill me off in their narrative, to create a story where she was a self-made orphan rather than the daughter of a working artist. It would have been easier to stay angry. Anger burns clean, gives you something to fight against. But underneath the anger was grief so profound it threatened to crack me open. I'd lost my daughter not to death or distance, but to shame. And that loss felt more permanent than any grave. My student Devin appeared at the studio the next morning with coffee and concern etched across his young face. Miss Hayes, I need to tell you something. I wasn't sure if I should, but... I gestured for him to sit. Whatever it is, just say it. I saw Charlotte last week at a networking event in the city. She was with Dominic and some of his colleagues. They were talking about wedding plans, and someone mentioned you, asked if her family would be attending from out of town. And? Devin's expression darkened. Dominic laughed and said Charlotte's family situation was complicated. Then Charlotte added that her mother was artistically inclined in a way that made it sound like a mental illness. Said you lived in your own world, disconnected from reality, and it was better not to involve you in important events. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my coffee. She said that. Word for word. Miss Hayes, I wanted to stand up and tell everyone the truth, that you're one of the most grounded, brilliant people I know. That you taught me more about discipline and integrity than any business professor ever could. But I didn't want to embarrass Charlotte. You did the right thing. Did I? Because watching her lie about you, watching everyone nod sympathetically like you're some kind of burden she has to carry, it made me sick. After Devin left, I walked to the window and stared out at the Oakland street below. November rain had started, turning the pavement dark and reflective. People hurried past with umbrellas, their faces obscured, everyone isolated in their own small circle of dry space. I thought about Charlotte's words, disconnected from reality. Was I? I'd built a life around creating beauty from mud and fire. I'd chosen art over wealth, meaning over money, authenticity over appearances. In Dominic's world, in Charlotte's new world, maybe that did seem disconnected from reality. But whose reality? One where worth is measured in bank accounts and social connections. Or one where worth is measured in what you build with your own hands, what you contribute to your community, how you treat people when no one's watching. I'd raised Charlotte to value the second kind of reality. Somewhere along the way, she'd been seduced by the first. The final conversation with Charlotte before the wedding came unexpectedly. I was at the farmer's market on a cold Saturday morning in early December, my booth arranged with holiday pieces, small bowls perfect for salt cellars, handmade ornaments, mugs and festive glazes. And suddenly, there she was. Charlotte, standing at the edge of my booth in a camel hair coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her expression uncertain. "Mom." I straightened slowly, my heart hammering. "Charlotte. Can we talk?" I gestured to the folding chair beside my table. She sat carefully, as if the metal might stain her expensive coat. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said quietly. "I came looking for you. Raymond Chen called me." My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "He said you had some concerns about Dominic. About the wedding. He asked me to meet with him, to look at some documents he'd found." "And did you?" Charlotte's jaw tightened. "I told him to stay out of my business. That you'd put him up to it because you couldn't accept that I'd moved beyond your world." "Charlie. Don't call me that." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to call me that anymore. You don't get to pretend we're still some team, still building things together in that studio. I'm not that little girl anymore, Mom. I'm not sitting on your workbench making lopsided bowls. I have a real career. A real life. A real future with a man who understands me. Does he? Or does he understand what you can do for him?" Her eyes flashed. "This is exactly why you're not invited to the wedding. Because you can't be happy for me. You can't accept that I want different things than you wanted. You spent your whole life in that studio, barely scraping by, convincing yourself that poverty was noble. Well, I don't think it's noble. I think it's a waste." The words landed like stones, each one a small violence. "Is that really what you think?" I asked softly. "That I wasted my life? I think you had potential and you squandered it. You could have gone back to school, gotten a business degree, opened a real gallery. Instead, you stayed in that same studio, making the same pottery, selling it for pennies. And now you're 70 years old with nothing to show for it. Nothing except you." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the pavement. "I didn't come here to fight. I came to tell you that I'm getting married in 2 days. With or without your blessing. Dominic makes me feel valued, Mom. He makes me feel like I'm worth something. You were always worth something. You just couldn't see it. No. You couldn't see that worth and money aren't separate things. That success and security matter. That I deserve better than what you had. You deserve love, Charlie. Real love. Not someone who wants to erase where you came from. Dominic doesn't want to erase anything. He wants to build a future. And I'm choosing that future over your past." She turned to leave, but I stood, my voice carrying across the market. "When he shows you who he really is, and I'll be here. No matter what he's told you about me. No matter what you believe right now. I'll be here." Charlotte paused, her back to me, shoulders rigid. For a moment, I thought she might turn around, might let the armor crack just enough to hear me. But she kept walking. Disappeared into the crowd of market-goers, leaving me standing alone at my booth with tears I refused to let fall. Mrs. Chen from the dumpling stand appeared at my elbow, pressing a napkin into my hand. She'll remember, she said quietly. When she needs you, she'll remember you were ready to catch her. I nodded, unable to speak. That night, I finished glazing the porcelain vase. Applied the final coat with steady hands despite the grief lodged in my chest. Tomorrow it would go into the kiln for its final firing, the hottest temperature, the one that would either transform it into something transcendent or shatter it completely. Like my relationship with Charlotte. Like the wedding approaching like a storm. Like the truth waiting to reveal itself. I loaded the kiln carefully, setting the temperature gauge, checking the vents. The firing would take 8 hours, then another 12 to cool enough to open. By the time the vase emerged, the community gala would be over. The award ceremony complete. And Charlotte would be 1 day away from making the biggest mistake of her life. I closed the kiln door, flipped the switch, and watched the temperature begin to climb. All I could do now was wait. And trust that when the heat became unbearable, Charlotte would finally see through the glaze to what lay beneath.